Hello everyone. So let's talk about how we can respond to climate change. What can we do? So we can react to climate change with two different approaches. One is to address the root cause of the problem, and the other is to protect ourselves from its impacts. So addressing the root cause of the climate change means pursuing actions to reduce greenhouse emissions, gas emissions, or withdraw these gases from the atmosphere. So that approach is called mitigation. The purpose is to alleviate or reduce severity of the climate change by improving energy efficiency, switching to cleaner renewable energy sources, preserving forests, recovering landfill gases, protecting soil quality. So this is the surface global warming, and this is how it's, if the emissions are not controlled, that's how it's gonna go. If they are controlled, then it's gonna go in this direction. So those are some things that can be done. So the second type is called adaptation. So that's cushioning ourselves from the impacts of the climate change. That's adaptation because the goal here is to adapt to change. So in this case, maybe installing elaborate pump systems, as they're doing in Miami Beach, to pump out their floodwaters. That's one example of adaptation. Another one would be making seawalls so that the residents of maybe Maldives and coastal cities, they have done that. So the pump systems installed in Miami Beach are example of adaptation strategy. And both adaptation and mitigation, they're needed to deal with climate change. We can't just say we're going to do one and we're not going to do the other. We have to do both. So pollution is already in the atmosphere. It'll keep driving global warming until equilibrium is reached. So until maybe we do something to clean out that pollution. So what can we do as an individual? We can individually reduce our carbon footprint with a series of actions and lifestyle changes. So carbon footprint is, the amount of carbon that we are responsible for emitting. So we can reduce that, and that's gonna help the environment. So actions that we can each take to reduce emissions. So one is how do you get around? Um, because driving is transportation accounts for 35% of US carbon emissions, largely because we rely on our cars that run on gasoline. If you drive less or you can live without a car, you'll cut down a lot on your carbon footprint. So to reduce the reliance on cars, some people that live near their workplaces, others use maybe buses or trains, or they can maybe bike to work, or they can walk. So this is something that's big. So maybe switching to an electric car if you can't really get around without a car. So that's one. Um, but we need multiple strategies. So we can encourage efficiency by using energy saving products. So as the technology is going up, they're trying to come up with the products that's gonna be efficient and that's gonna contribute less to the carbon emissions. So what do you eat? If you enjoy, we talked about, how it takes 20 times more energy to raise beef compared to plant diet or plants. So enjoying a plant-rich diet with fewer animal products will help the carbon intensive foods like beef, and it's gonna waste less food. It's gonna, if you eat locally grown food, that's gonna be helpful. So cutting down the meat consumption would decrease the demand for the meat, and then that's gonna help the environment. Maybe get involved on campus in sustainability efforts, get engaged politically, or get trained for a green collar job. So try to encourage people to, be less wasteful and more sustainable, um, or encourage a sustainable lifestyle. So as we said, cutting down on gasoline consumption can insignificantly improve our carbon footprint. Um, and then supporting alternative technologies like electric vehicles, hydrogen fuel cells, and alternative fuels would be helpful. If you are able to switch to electric vehicle, it's recommended to do so. Maybe use buses or subways. And electricity generation produces 35% of US carbon dioxide. Use energy conservation technologies like new generations of light bulbs. So that'd be helpful. Other thing we can do is we can put a price on carbon. This is to compensate public for the external costs. We all suffer from climate change. So carbon pricing, that's going to remove the burden of paying for these impacts from the public and shifts it to the people who are responsible for the emissions or the entities. So if the producers are charged the price for the emissions, they'll have a strong economic incentive to devise ways to reduce emissions. Then they'll start thinking about the ways, what can we do to reduce it so I don't have to pay that much? All right, so we can also try to engineer the climate change, or sorry, the climate. So the geoengineering approach would be to suck carbon dioxide out of the air. How can we do that? To do that, we might enhance photosynthesis in natural systems by planting trees, or by fertilizing ocean phytoplankton with nutrients like iron. Or we could try to design artificial trees that filter out carbon dioxide. Another approach would be to cool the planet down by blocking sunlight before it reaches Earth. We might deflect sunlight by injecting sulfates or other fine dust particles into stratosphere. So by deploying maybe reflecting mirrors on land or at sea or in space. So that's something called geoengineering. So it takes a lot of technology, maybe it takes a long, long time to develop these, but it might be helpful. Blocking sunlight will not help the greenhouse gases. So ocean acidification will continue. And then any method would work as long as the society has the money for it and the ability to maintain it. So if we were to block the sunlight for decades, then suddenly stop doing it while greenhouse gas concentrations are higher than ever, then it's gonna warm the atmosphere very quickly. So like I said, we need to start doing something individually, maybe try to do something every day that's gonna help the climate change. And government policies, corporate actions, international treaties, carbon pricing. So all those are, some of the methods they're trying to come up with to reduce the carbon emissions, and they're trying to address the climate change issue with that.